Well, we're gonna talk to quite a sensitive, but also quite a exciting little moment, I think, in the world of crowd safety. But before we go into a conversation with four very experienced gentlemen who we'll introduce in a little while, I'd like to very quickly introduce a colleague of mine, Brian, who's going to stand up and just give a little bit of a background. And this doesn't normally happen at shows like this, and I feel really honoured that you've made it across today, Brian. But Brian's going to give a little bit of background as to why we're doing this.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Brian Dubiski. A little over 3 years ago, we lost our daughter, Madison Dubiski, at the Travis Scott Astroworld Music Festival in Houston, Texas. Our family has worked for several years now, building a foundation.
Hold it closer.
And hoping to create some change and just some better safety processes and protocols, especially around crowd safety management. We did our research and found Dr. Mark Hamilton and Steve Allen, who we consider to be two of the very best in this space, to create a new course for some Showstop processes and trainings. And at the end of the day, I have my family here. We've all traveled across the pond, and we've literally are launching this today. This is the first time I have personally spoken in front of a group or a crowd. We're very excited and humbled to be here and know that everyone that's listening here right now is an intricate part of us moving forward and making a positive impact. Our main goal was to ensure our daughter didn't die in vain, and that maybe hopefully we can have a brighter future so this doesn't happen to someone else. I've got my son here and my partner and Madison's mother and her partner, and we're just very humbled to be here and thank everyone for taking the time to listen to this. We know collectively together we can just do better. Everyone deserves to come home at the end of the night after an event or a concert or a festival. And we're hoping that everyone will collectively join us in our journey. And we really appreciate everyone being here. And I'll keep it short so that we can get to the good stuff here. But thank you, everyone, and we appreciate you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. It really is quite unusual that we actually hear, as production sort of professionals, the impact of what happens when things go wrong. And that was very powerful, Brian. Thanks for really a lot for doing that. So we're gonna get on. I'm gonna have a discussion with four incredibly experienced people from our industry about the initiative that's come out of this, the positive initiative that Pink Bose has put its name behind, called Showstop. Before I go any further, I'd like to just go around the panel here and ask everyone to introduce themselves. So I'm going to start on my right. Conal, can you just tell the audience who you are?
Yeah, hello, my name's Conal Dodds. I'm from Crosstown Concerts. I'm a national concert promoter. I've been doing it for 30 odd years. Do about 600 concerts a year, from clubs right through to stadiums, greenfield sites. So I've promoted thousands of concerts. These bags don't come for free.
Hi, good morning everybody. My name's Mark Hamilton. I've been in the industry for 52 plus years. Some of the notable achievements: managing director for ground operations at the 2012 Olympics, and I think I might be having a problem with my sound, but that's okay, we'll carry on. Oh, here's a man with a microphone. 1, 2, 1, 2. So yes, notable managing director of ground operations for the London 2012 Olympics, head of security for Live 8 in Hyde Park, security director for Paul McCartney for the last 34 years.
Thank you, Mark. Steve, do you want to tell everyone?
Hello everyone, my name's Steve Allen. I am the CEO of an organisation called Crowd Safety, and prior to that, in their earlier life, I was the Director of Security for Oasis for the best part of 15 years worldwide. I toured with Blur, Pulp, Eminem, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Led Zeppelin, Beastie Boys, amongst others. And on the Oasis tours in the early days on the Be Here Now tour, I identified that crowd profile was somewhat extreme in terms of energy, and we devised the Showstop Procedure. That's where it was born in 1998.
Right, any suggestions how I follow these guys? No,
Go,
nowhere
Steve.
near as well known or high profile. I'm a bit of promoter 12 or 13 years, mainly dance music festivals all around the world. I started, owned and recently sold We Are Festival, that continue to produce and promote shows, club shows and outdoor festivals. Steve Durham, sorry.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, so I think as you probably appreciate, I've got a lot of experience either side of me here in terms of the concert world, the live music world, the live events world. So we got quite a lot of ground to cover. I'd like to just sort of establish first off, and I'm going to go to Mark first. Mark, can we just talk through what is Showstop? Because it's not something new, and maybe you and Steve can just give a very brief kind of what is Showstop and where's it come from?
Yeah, okay, so Showstop, as Graham said, is not a new concept. It's been around for 25 plus years. And it is the key critical component in crisis management when you need to stop a show in an emergency. And it's something that needs to be executed swiftly, decisively, with knowledge, with experience, and with the trust of the organisation that you are representing.
Got anything to add to that, Steve?
I would say that the only thing I could add to that is this is proven. I've stopped shows 32 times, quite a lot of those with Oasis worldwide, but it's ranged from crowds, fire, other emergencies, structural collapses, structural failures, and the process that we implemented was a decisive and rapid process because seconds count.
Okay, I mean, I'm looking around the audience and I'm seeing, some faces that I know have been around Showstops and will be familiar a little bit with it. There'll be other people I don't recognise who'll be pleased for that definition. But I think maybe a bit of history from you gentlemen in terms of, as you say, it's not new, but from your perspective, I'm going to stick with you, Steve, while we're on you. I mean, for you, where did Showstop come from, and then we can sort of maybe get some shared experience in where it's been. So when would you say Showstop started?
It started in 1998 by an Englishman in Scotland, and ironically Mark Hamilton was on that same show. Mark was running the security for the venue, and I had a chat backstage with Noel and Liam and said, look, I've got a major concern. I'm well versed with crowds, and Conal and I used to do multiple shows all around the UK, so I wasn't nervous around crowds. I was well versed with energetic crowds, but this profile of the audience was completely different, and it jumped out to me that something wrong could happen very quickly during the live performance. And I said, look, I want to have this procedure in place whereby if I give you the sign or come up to you, there's a reason to stop this show. I'm not just coming up to ruin your night. This is for life safety. The entire band were fully supportive of it, as were management. And then I sat in the catering that night and I thought, what are we going to call this? We'll call it the Showstop Procedure. And from that point on, that was communicated in advanced communication with correspondence to the agents, the promoters, and to the venue. And then from there on, moving forward, I would go on subsequent tours where I would be notified about a Showstop Procedure, which seemed to make what we were trying to aim as a simple and rapid solution into a convoluted, complex solution, which required a discussion at front stage or the heads of departments to come together, which really missed the whole point of this rapid and decisive intervention.
I'm going to jump around a little bit if you don't mind, because I know obviously you've mentioned their Oasis, and that was kind of, that audience was where it kind of came from. Conal, you were promoting Oasis back in those days, weren't you, on those shows when they were? What do you recall of those audiences and those times?
Well, the audience was, well, for the standards that we'd seen at the time, the audiences were wild, and the first proper big gig they did, Oasis, was indoors at Earl's Court, and Earl's Court used to have a void underneath it. We had the boat show.
Yeah.
The crowd jumping up and down caused a sort of bass wave that cracked people's walls for about a quarter of a mile, but it had a very lively audience that jumped up and down and moshed and moved forwards.
Yeah.
So the barrier systems were over the next several years, barrier systems became much more developed in terms of keeping an audience safe in a crowd, but having that volume of people all jumping down at the same time, it soon became evident that you needed to have people either high or on the side of the stages just to watch the audience, to be looking out for crowd collapses, for people going down, so that if that happened, that the audience, someone could go and tap the singer on or Noel, for instance, and say, please tell the crowd to stop, or we're going to have to, it became apparent that there was no structure in place for that to happen. In a way, I'm surprised we're having this this talk now, all these years on, because every concert that we do now, in the afternoon, after the band have sound checked, all the representatives of the show that are running the gig, so the promoter's representative, the security for the artist, if the artist has got someone touring, the security for the venue, health and safety, the venue managers, we all sit together, have a briefing. Sometimes they're 10 minutes, sometimes they're half an hour, where we discuss the nature of the audience, what to expect, are there certain points in the show where the audience might be livelier than others?
Sure.
But an important thing is we identify who are the people that are going to physically deal with stopping the show should that occur, and what that chain of command is. One of the things that
do you think? Would you say industry-wise, your kind of experience with Oasis has made you more tuned into that than maybe some other people in the industry?
I think, I would go, and when the band used to go on, I would stand in the front barrier, or if we had a secondary barrier, I'd walk the secondary barrier as well for the first 4 or 5 songs. Because the audience have been waiting for hours to see the band. They're all incredibly excited. They're all jumping up and down. They're moshing. They're surging. Some people can't cope and have to be pulled out. But that's the critical time generally in those sort of gigs. But we know that. We know what the set list is. We know the peaks and troughs of audience dynamic and movement during a set. We know that, but in terms of having a standard around the world where venues and local security and local health and safety adhere to, it seems obviously that isn't happening.
Yes, I think your insight and the insight, and quite often that's been the case, isn't it? The different regions have led sort of safety. It
seems common sense. Surely it should be happening.
It doesn't happen. And going on to you, Mark, I mean, there's 2 things that came out of your comments there, because obviously I've been talking with Steve and Mark a bit. And Mark, there were 2 things that you said there. Because Mark, you were on those early Oasis shows as well, weren't you?
Yeah, I was involved in quite a lot of them, actually.
You told me a story about the stadium. Was it up north?
Yeah, the Stadium of Light in Sunderland, the Oasis were playing and the support band was Kasabian. And I had arrived later on in the day because I wasn't actually running that operation. And I made straight for the control room. And when I walked into the control room, I looked at the CCTV screens and identified a crowd problem in one part of the stadium that wasn't visible from the stage. It was behind the stand. So I called for Showstop. And the line of communication wasn't effective from the control room to the stage. So I ran down to the stage and I informed the security rep for the artist what was wrong and to stop the show. And he went on stage and he stopped the show, and Kasabian waited until I returned to the control room. But when I returned to the control room, the promoter at the time come running in, shouting, "Why have you stopped the show? Who stopped the show? There's nothing wrong at the front of the stage." Until the safety officer of the stadium pointed at me and said it was him. And the promoter, who knows me very, very well, turned around and went, "Oh, Mark, it's you. Why did you stop the show?" I said, "Well, I stopped it for this reason." And he said, "When will it restart?" I said, "I'll restart when I say so and when it's safe to do so." And he went, "That's fine, thank you very much." That's Showstop in action, but it also demonstrates that it happens not just at the front of the stage. It may be required elsewhere. And what that also demonstrates, and what I still experience to this day, having just finished a tour in South and Central America with Paul McCartney, all stadium shows, that there are still people who are all aware of Showstop, but in actual fact, are not really cognizance of the gravity of what it means if you have to execute that decision. And very often,
Because they've not been trained.
yeah, because they've not been trained.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'll send out information in advance, and everybody's aware that Showstop features very highly in the security rider, and I'll have the security meeting, and I'll go through the emergency procedures, and then we'll get to Showstop. And I always have to explain that Showstop will be initiated if there's an imminent threat to life. Some people don't even understand that even that's the reason for Showstop. And then I'll ask the really $60,000 question. Who from the venue is going to come to me as the person who has to walk on stage and tell Paul McCartney to stop singing Let It Be, or whatever song it might be? Who's going to come and tell me, one, the show needs to stop, and what's the information that I need to communicate to Paul so he's aware of why we're stopping the show? And does he need to communicate anything to the audience? And do we need a translator by my side? And then there's a debate. They all start looking around the room. They start going, well, actually, well, maybe you should do it this time. Or, well, what about you? Well, I'm not doing it. That is not the way to approach Showstop.
Sure.
And I still see that to this day. And like Steve, I have initiated Showstop on countless occasions, all of them successful. The reason being, as Conal pointed out, having the right people in the right room who understand what Showstop is, but also understand that it's a time-critical function. You need to decide it very quickly, and you need to execute it even faster, because time is of the essence.
Before we go too far into what it should be, because unusually, very unusually, Steve Durham hasn't had much to say yet, and that's so. I just want to bring Steve in, and just while we're getting everyone's sort of experiences of Showstop, and obviously as a festival organizer, as an event organizer, I want to get a benchmark for everyone in the audience here. Where are we in the world? And obviously, Mark's given us a very clear indication that on his South America, Central America tour, you know, we've obviously heard from Brian earlier on that potentially across parts of the US. Where in the festival
to be
world?
honest, I agree with Conal. The benchmark used to be quite low. You know, when I'm not as experienced as these guys, but when I first started in the industry after a few years, it was more an assignment. It was more you were picked out because you were the promoter or because you were this person. There's your Showstop card, hold it up, let everyone know if you need to stop the show.
Yeah.
It was a real knowledge gap for most people, definitely a qualification gap. There was, as you said, Conal, there was no one that really knew the structure of how to execute it. I had one experience of it a few years ago when, luckily it wasn't actually anything untoward. The council just asked to shut the show 15 minutes early. So I've got on stage, had a word with the tour manager, he's had a word with his DJ. It was actually Andy C, drum and bass DJ. So I don't know if you guys know drum and bass heads, but they're not exactly willing participants when it comes to early egress. So, and everyone's on stage is looking at me, then the crowd are looking at me. I'm public enemy number one, and I'm thinking there must be a better solution to this. You know, there must be a better way to do this. I've done what I was told, stop the show, but no one really knew what was going on. We should have engaged with the artist himself. Because if Andy had got on there and said, everyone please move, you know, in a nice fashion to your right and exit, it would have gone great. And that was a big point Steve made. We have to educate the artists on it. So since then, when I saw Steve was involved in this, I've been talking to councils, to insurance companies, I've been saying to councils, from now on, if anyone submits an EMP, make sure that Showstop procedure is in place. Make sure they have qualified people there. I've been talking to insurance companies and said, are you sure that you want to insure gigs that don't have Showstop people there? So I'm there to spread the word and say there is now a bona fide qualification. I'm coming from a background that I didn't know I had that knowledge gap, and I bet a lot of people don't, and we're here to provide it.
Yeah, I mean, so from your perspective, as you say, I mean, as I said, I know there are people in the audience here that will have been on Showstops and will have conducted some effective Showstops. When I see some of their faces, I know they've been around the industry a while, so it's kind of, but at the same time, as you say, it's how it differs from venue to festival site to venue to festival site, and who takes that responsibility. I guess that's not been clear, and you'd say as an organizer, as a festival organizer, and probably as a promoter now, is that maybe it's time that we had a clear
Well, actually,
procedure.
at my level,
that's-
because
that's
I do
uniform.
smaller events because I do smaller events with several different tents,
Yeah.
rather than one big headline show.
Right.
We do things like we stagger the closing, and we stagger the egress for every single tent. So to a degree, I would have an easier job show stopping. Whereas when you've got 100,000 people watching one stage, that's when it gets really tricky.
Yeah.
Personally, I'd like to see it as a recognised a standard, that people, there has to be someone as part of every show that has had some formal training.
Yeah.
You wouldn't expect to do a concert anywhere that we didn't have a first aider,
Which first aid it or
or a
fire. Yeah.
or a fire marshal or whatever it is,
Yeah.
fire marshal, paramedic, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think the thing you mentioned before, Mark, the most important thing to happen in a Showstop procedure is a rapid response and then a rapid implementation of that response. And, you've worked with Paul McCartney for a long time. If you were looking after his show, you can walk on the stage, he knows who you are, and you've got the confidence of it because you've got many years of experience. But not everyone has that years of experience. Not everybody has that ability to be able to walk onto a crowd, possibly with thousands of people. They might feel nervous about doing that. You said to me, Steve, recently that, one of your guys, we did a gig together with Oasis at the City of Manchester Stadium, and the barrier moves in the first 2 or 3 songs. There was a wave of people literally moved the front of stage barrier, maybe a metre or so, and the barrier came apart, and it was spotted, and one of Steve's guys had to go on and tell the band to stop, but he was nervous about doing it because he was having to stop a show to 65,000 people in the second song. That was a big deal.
It was a big deal, and what had happened on that particular show, we had a Showstop team, so I was in South America touring, and I communicated with the promoters, look, this crowd profile is still very energetic, we need a secondary barrier. And they said, well, look, we're happy with this. And I said, well, look, let's have some mitigation, and we want to put a Showstop team in. This was a very new concept for have a Showstop team for that particular, for audiences, as to speak. It was fully taken on board by the promoters. They welcomed it, and they said, yep, that makes sense to us, let's take it on board. So I wrote the procedure out, went and met the stadium safety officer, briefed him on all this, and we had people in elevated positions on a separate network, competent individuals, well versed with crowds, well communicated with each other, and the representation in the control room to appease the event safety officer. Equally, when we speak about what can happen in front of the stage, we can see all that. But it could have been terrorism, it could have been a fire in the concourse, it could have been anything going on that we can't see. So the safety officer needs to have a direct line to the Showstop team. We shouldn't have been initiating that. That should have been from the venue or the promoter. We know that now years later. But we initiated a Showstop. And what happened was Noel had turned around to me and said, did you see that? We had all eyes on it. And I was checking with our team about crowd collapses. Was there any trampling? And then we had a sign from the barrier. I jumped down into the front of the stage barrier, saw the situation, got Liam Gallagher's attention immediately. Liam stopped the show. One of my team then, Marty, I said to Marty, get on stage and tell Noel, because they're looking lost. They need to know what's going on. Tell him we've got a barrier problem, there's a structural failure potentially, the barriers move forward, he needs to communicate with the crowd. At that moment, first song, when the band come on stage, or any song during it, the artist wants to know what's going on. What we had though was a rapid intervention. There was an immediate response. So the incident development has been simmered down. We've now got immediate control. All the artist wants to know is what's going on, what do I need to do? Because the artist initially said, do I walk off stage? If he'd have walked off stage with the band, we'd have had a public order situation. There was no public order situation, no injuries, no deaths. Right?
I think
And
that's,
what-
yeah.
And what we're saying is that that's from our side. If we had not have had a Showstop representative in control, if we wouldn't have had a Showstop team, if we wouldn't have been on that team stopping the show straight away, who's going to come to us and tell us? So what we're saying is there should be someone competent, who we've got confidence in, that isn't going to stop the show for the slightest scuffle or someone going down. Life safety threat only. If they're right next to me and they've met me on the day of show and there's been advanced communication, They can tell me to stop the show from event control. So if there's terrorism, if there's drones, if there's anything else going on in the venue, that can tell me immediately, and we've got a direct line of contact without any delay.
That's given us a great overview and insight as to how we've got to where we are. And I think what's interesting, I'm sure you'll agree, is that across the years, this Showstop, it's not new. It's been established, it's been developed and evolved and used in different ways by different people at different levels.
But there isn't a standard. There is
not a standard that's currently applied that you'd say when Paul McCartney appears in South America, North America, Asia, wherever he's going, that there's not a standard that the artist can rely on or that the organisation can rely on that's going to be implemented. And I think the knowledge is there. Clearly the knowledge has been there for quite a long time as to how this could happen. And unfortunately sometimes it takes a tragedy or a focus of energy. And I think yourself and Mark, coupling with the Pink Bows, are sort of bringing that focus of energy that actually we need to get this message out there that we could create a standard. We got some resources to create some training, create a training program. So I'd just be interested to sort of think with you, kind of like, as we move this forward and try and create an international standard, which is not an easy thing to do, in these initial phases, what's been the reaction of people, say, that you've spoken to, Steve and Mark, who are fellow professionals? And I'd be interested to know, you've already said you'd like to see a standard kind of thing. I guess you would, Steve, as well.
Well, yeah, even though Soul We Are Festival, they're the first festival that are going to announce that they're going to initiate this standardised show.
So there's a training course being put together, being accredited right now by a university, I believe.
Yeah,
which will be in place.
With the training course, the International Institute of Risk and Safety. Well, if I may take a couple of steps back. First of all, the Pink Bows Foundation retained Mark and myself. We were expert witnesses in the Astroworld trial, both of us actually for co-defendants. And yet the Dubiski family and the Pink Bows Foundation sought to seek us to represent them, moving forward with their desire and determination to force change for the good in the legacy of their daughter, Madison Dubiski. And there was initial discussions about, should we do a crowd management course, a security course? And we said, look, there's hundreds of these courses out there. One of the material failures, or conclusions, should I say, from the Houston Police Department was around the lack of communication for Showstop. So we said that this actually ties in, and we were astounded that after all these years that I developed this Showstop procedure, still years later, it's misunderstood. People think, oh, that's a total stop to the show. It's all the power coming off, it's going to ruin it, we're going to have a public order problem. I have never had a public order problem, ever. There's never been any injuries, there's never been any deaths. It's controlled. Artists love it, because they're looking good and their fans are safe. Venues love it. Promoters love it because it's liability. Audience loves it. And public perception, really, when you ask me what's the feedback been, I was out on a 50th birthday on Friday evening, and they said, well, what are you doing? Well, we're involved in this now. And they said, well, doesn't that happen at every show now? No. And just one minor example on this, I was retained to go out to a first world country, which will remain unmentioned, 60,000 a day, multi-stage festival, back-to-backs, no camping, in and out. And I'd asked them what the Showstop procedure is. Oh, yes, mate, it's in the EMP. Great. Well, there's a paragraph there, but you mention it. Who's doing it? How's it happening? What is the procedure? Well, if the front of stage pit supervisor, if they see a problem, they'll radio event control. Event control will dispatch someone from the control centre down to the front of stage, they'll make an assessment, they'll then go back, they'll have a powwow, and then there'll be a decision to stop the show. Great. We calculated that as 12 minutes with someone walking at pace. You've made that decision to stop the show, who's going to come on stage and stop the show? Well. And it astounded me that this first world country, and what it showed me was that they didn't have the belief in those individuals that could call a show stop. Where was their positioning? Had they been on that side of stage, with confidence, they could stop the show, inform the performance rep, but also simultaneously inform event control what's going on. But at the same token, if event control had a problem, straight to that Showstop manager on the side of the stage, and it's instantaneous, rapid. Now, for any inquiry or investigation post-incident, this is only going to provide positive mitigation, but ultimately it's going to improve the chances of life safety and reduction of injuries for those in the audience.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I think that's...
coming back to your question,
Sorry, yeah.
the response from insurers, from venues, from stadiums, from event organisers has been overwhelming. Security organisations reaching out to us. My phone goes non-stop now about inquiries about this show because people want to be recognised as qualified to do this role, and I'm pretty confident, having spoken with Steve and Conal behind the scenes, as promoters and event organisers, they want to have the ability to have the confidence in whoever they're appointing or who's ever putting themselves forward to be a Showstop manager, that they're actually competent. They know what they're doing. So it serves multiple purposes for the good.
I'm going to throw the next question at you, Mark, if you don't mind, because this sounds brilliant. We've got a course. We know what's needed. It's recognised by people. We've got a standard. So in the ideal world, what we're going to do now is train. We've got security professionals in the audience here. We've got event production professionals from massive shows. So it's kind of I suppose so. A couple of questions here. Is the Showstop course for security professionals, event professionals, venue managers, all of the above? Who should be aware of this? But B, how does the industry pay for it, and can the industry afford to do this at a time when margins are that tight?
Well, to answer the first question, all of the above.
All of the above. So
Because it's quite simple, really. I mean, any time, unless I was on tour, if I was initiating Showstop, I was doing it on behalf of the promoter or the venue. So the promoter or the venue had already taken responsibility by having that conversation with me. Now, as it happened, I just happened to have that vast amount of experience to be able to initiate that. The Showstop Procedure course is to allow us to give everybody, as many people as possible who are involved in live music events, the underpinning theory and the ability to put into practice the Showstop Procedure with confidence. Now, it's down to the organisation, whether that be venue or promoter, who they appoint as that Showstop manager. Who's that person going to be? Because they're going to be collating a lot of information under duress in a short space of time to then bring it to me on stage to say, stop the show. Now, if anybody wants to come and have a conversation with me about whether that should not be a qualified position, I'm happy to have that conversation. But as Conal pointed out, we wouldn't expect people to conduct first aid without first aid training. We don't expect people to put out fires without fire safety training.
Yeah.
So why would we not want the right person to be trained, knowledgeable, qualified, in stopping a show, which I go back to, is the key critical crisis management component that we all have when we need to stop the show in an emergency, when it's live. And it needs control at that point in time. And the second question was again, Graham?
well, I guess it's one of those tricky questions, really. But it's like you're going to face a new course or a new qualification to the industry. There's going to be a cost to become qualified, I guess. I don't know what that is. There's going to be a cost to take the course and get your qualification as a qualified Showstop person.
Yeah.
And I suppose, it's that cost versus value. What's the value in having that, and what's the cost of it, and can the industry afford it?
Well, the first value is human life. That's the first value. The second part of that is that, we've got the Dubiski family here, and their experience with Astroworld tells us very clearly that you can have a mature organisation responsible for a major event, and yet it failed, and it cost billions of dollars to settle claims on that one incident, that one tragedy. So the first cost is human life. And for people like me who have been in the industry to keep people safe, there is no argument when it comes to cost. And in actual fact, in the greater scheme of things, if I've got a show with 50,000 people and they're all paying for £100 a ticket, which is probably pretty low in this day and age, that's £5 million. And the cost of putting somebody on training is 0.0000000%.
Yeah,
One.
yeah, sure, yeah. I take your point.
I rest my case.
So it's a very small investment out of the big pot.
Well, yeah, and there's an added value as well, I would like to say, because once you put in place a professionally qualified Showstop person, the organisation should, by default, start to look at what is called their decision-making architecture. And what that means is, when you call Showstop, a lot of other things need to happen. So it's not just about one action. There are other people who need to get ready to do things. That's about communication, it's about decision, it's about management, it's about leadership. So having that qualified person allows somebody to be in that room during the planning process to start testing the organisation's ability to respond in a much wider way.
Sure.
Graham, can I just add something as well? Just as listening to Mark there, what really resonates with me is I've been in the event industry 32 years, and I've been very fortunate with the shows that I've done, and I've worked on a wide range of shows from F1 through to Oasis and corporate shows and smaller functions. I went and did a health and safety degree because I'd had a meeting with the general manager in 1994 of Wembley Arena when I was doing a safety meeting, and he asked me if I had a health and safety qualification. And I went a little bit nervous thinking, should I have a qualification to be talking about this? What I've learned since then is risk is about foreseeability if something goes wrong. Is it foreseeable in a remote desert location to put in risk assessment about a plane crash when there's no flight path over us? Come on. Or a meteor landing on us and having measures in place building a dome over us? No. Grossly disproportionate. However, is it foreseeable that an incident could happen during a live performance? 100%, and history shows us that. Case studies show us that. We've got emerging threats now with terrorism that target large concentrations of people to amplify their message. And those of you that may have watched the news on New Year's Day, all you saw was the New Orleans attack all day long. They've achieved what their goal was. So for us, it's about foreseeability. Is it foreseeable? What is the consequences? What's the worst outcomes? Death. So there's no defence if we haven't got this system or procedure in place. So I feel very passionate about it, as you can probably tell, and strongly focused on it, because I know that every Showstop that I've done has been successful. And I know some of you have done them as well, they've been successful. And they need to be. I've got young children that are 14 years old, twin boys. They're going to be going to concerts and festivals soon. My hope is that this is in place for when they're doing it, so I can feel safer and they can come back, and ultimately is to avert the likelihood of another tragedy happening.
And I think you've both touched on a point there, I suppose, and it goes, I mean, everyone in the audience, all the event professionals we've got in the room here, it's the core of what you want to do is send everybody home safely, you know.
Absolutely.
Make sure they've had a good time, make sure you've looked after, but absolutely make sure they all go home safely. And I guess what you're looking at then is that what you were talking about in terms of the confidence thing. How do you prove confidence? And I guess you were saying with the Astroworld sort of expert witness position that you were in, that proving confidence is actually a very difficult thing.
That's a really good point, Graham. I've been involved with high-profile cases for criminal cases. This was a very, very, very intense investigation, which had a 2.5-year full-time commitment from me. And it dawned on me the absolute forensic scrutiny which is undertaken, not just by me, but by attorneys, by all the other expert witnesses that will come in and literally scrutinise everything. And Mark and I have put this course together with Professor Chris Kemp so that it can demonstrate and provide mitigation for those that are actually in that role as Showstop manager, but equally for the venue management or those ultimately responsible for the safety that can demonstrate we use a competent person. Now, what I would say, some of you may have your own Showstop procedures and they may be very robust. My caveat to that would be this: look at your procedure, look at what you're doing, look at yourself in the mirror and say, if God forbid if something went wrong, will this stand the scrutiny test from expert witnesses and lawyers? Is it robust enough to stand that test? If it is, great. Second question, when you're in the dock, if you're being cross-examined in that dock, in front of a family that had lost their loved one, and lawyers, can that stand that scrutiny test? So this is what this is for, and ultimately to save lives, but to mitigate as well.
Well, from my point of view as a concert promoter, the most important thing, and Brian, you mentioned it when you came on, is that everyone should be able to send their kids off to a concert and they should come home. Of course they should, you know. That's an awful thing that's happened. But you mentioned before about costs of this. You know, the costs are negligible in terms of, in the scheme of things, in terms of the training that people could, you know, whether they work for a venue or a security company or work for an artist, the actual, you know, they build that into their salary or their wages, or if the security company at a venue is providing the Showstop person, you know, in the same way that we pay a higher rate for a supervisor, we pay a higher rate for the person that's got, you know, the Showstop sort of experience.
Conal, I've spoken to insurance companies, the one I used, and they said not only will they discount that cost from the policy, they may very well pay for the training for the Showstop qualified people. So talk to your insurer; they'll be very supportive.
That's brilliant to hear. That's
But
good.
the important thing, I know it's a relevant thing, but people shouldn't be thinking about liabilities when it comes to doing concerts. They should be thinking about the public, you know, 100%. You know, it's about safety, people coming, having a good time. Ultimately, the general public pay all our wages anyway, so everyone should be trying to protect them and make sure they're coming and having a great experience.
Yeah.
But this also, we've talked a lot about big gigs, about Oasis, Paul McCartney, Formula One, whatever. But crowd safety is important at every level.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
Right down the scale. You know, I had to do a Showstop myself at a rock band called Idols about 3 years ago in a little club in Bristol with 1,000 people there because the barrier moved. And at the time I thought about it, actually, even though I spotted that and I had the experience because I've been doing this for a long time and I knew what to do, we didn't have anything in place on that show. It wasn't an experienced touring party. They didn't have they didn't have their own security person with them. The venue hadn't been open for very long. So it comes right down the scale. That's why I think there should be some kind of standardised qualification that's imposed by, be it local authorities, councils, government or whatever else. I think it is important because
It become part of the
all of us are only ever possibly a few minutes away from there being a significant issue at a concert, and nobody wants that to happen, obviously.
No.
Well, do you know what,
I'm interested.
Colin?
I'm looking at the audience here, and I'm sort of thinking the collective age of this size of the audience is probably the same as the five of us. But that's great. We've got a lot of young people coming into post-COVID, we lost a load of experience. There's still a lot of experience in the industry, but we did lose a lot of experience. But what's interesting is we've got a lot of young people coming in, and actually to have courses like this and pass the experience and the information on is absolutely crucial, isn't it?
Well, just on that point, I've been at the forefront of improvements in crowd safety for at least 45 years. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think this brought value.
Sure.
And I'm bringing this to the table through the Pink Boys Foundation because it's really important that the generations that's coming through who are going to drive forward the live event sector in the future know that they've got the support of who went before them and who put in place safety measures to make sure their events are much safer going forward.
Yeah. No, and that's the encouraging thing. It's the responsible thing. It's the obvious thing to do. Collaborate, share knowledge, and pass it on to the next
Yeah, the
generation.
collaboration part is absolutely right. A lot of the safety culture that exists here in the UK was developed through collaboration and cooperation with everybody. Concert promoters particularly very strongly vocal in the improvements in safety for the audiences in the concerts that they were promoting. Venues as well. So everybody was in it together. And that's why we have a standard now, which we're not complacent about. But we have a standard now that other people in other parts of the world envy because we get it right. But we're always testing ourselves to make sure we continually improve and innovate in what we do with crowd safety.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Graham, you mentioned age. Regardless of age, if you're new to promoting, you're tempted always to look at the upside, building a brand, putting on a great show, profitability.
Yeah.
As you get more experience, you look at what the downside can bring to you, and you're looking at the real risks involved in that show, which comes with experience.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. And passing that on, and absolutely important.
Someone said something to me recently and it resonated. They said cars, vehicles that are sold nowadays, the safety technology in these vehicles is pushing the boundaries, yet there's still going to be accidents. We as a collective, I know this industry takes safety seriously. No one's saying it doesn't. I know they do. No one wants anyone to get hurt. This is something that can assist that further and that further development and pushing on forward. And it's proportionate.
Yeah, good point, Steve. Thanks. I think we're going to have, we're reaching kind of, yeah, I'm being signalled that we're running out of time. I don't know if anyone's got a burning question from the audience. Stick your hand up now, or come and grab one of the panellists at the end here and have a chat. Anyone got any burning questions now? We have one question here. I've got a mic. Oh, there you go. Pass that microphone on. You might need that for the answer, Mark. You never know. It might be coming your way. Yeah, I think you. Sorry.
Thanks. This has been a very interesting, very important discussion.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering, is there anything extra that can be done without frightening everybody to have a kind of, if you like, sort of education program for the audience, so that the audience have an understanding of their part to play and that they're very comfortable with the whole situation, and if you like, it maybe enhances the experience, so that they're in some ways, I don't know, working in a responsible way, or be able to work with you, so that when something happens, they're on the ball with it, and they don't feel they're not in control.
Sure.
Well, it's a very good point. And just on topic, Anne-Marie, the UK CMA chair, just walks in just at that point. Pingbo's Foundation have aligned with UK CMA, Event Safety Alliance Canada, Global Crowd Management Alliance. And it's a very good point you've raised, because that's something which the alliances and the Pingbo's Foundation are working with as well. They recognise education isn't just one way, it's all round. But that's something that everyone is working towards as well. How that's going to be done, I don't know, but I know Annie, bless her, and the team are really focused on that, so it's a really valid point.
It's quite a tricky one, isn't it? Because you want to educate your audience, but at the same time, let's not forget, they've come out for a good time, and what you don't want to do is, like, when you get on a plane, okay, and we're now going to do a safety briefing, this is where you don't want to be doing that at a concert, do you?
You don't need to do it like.
No, exactly, yeah.
It's just a question of making them feel empowered. That's
Yeah.
I think...
Are we on here?
Keep the cuts off.
I don't think audiences that come to concerts in the UK should have any concerns about crowd safety or the means, the efforts that are being put in by venues, by concert promoters, by touring parties. I don't think that's in doubt. I think the thing is just having a standard, so that there's a recognised route of command, to make sure that if anything does go wrong, that it's looked after, as quickly as possible. Audiences should feel safe in this country. I think we're probably, I don't know any facts and figures, but I would assume that Britain figures pretty highly in terms of crowd safety at all forms of concerts.
Yeah, I haven't got data either, but yes, I'm assuming the same, to be honest. I haven't been around the world a bit, but yeah. I'm most definitely being signalled that we're out of time from left and right. So can I ask you to please put your hands together and thank my panellists here. Been a fascinating conversation. Thank you for your attention. If you've got any questions, please come and ask or get in touch with us. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.